What would you do if someone secretly recorded a private conversation with the Queen herself? Not a passing chat, not a casual remark, but intimate, behind-the-scenes discussions meant only for the eyes and ears of the royal family? Now imagine that person is Meghan Markle, a duchess, beloved by millions, yet accused of betraying the most sacred trust in the monarchy. The very walls of Buckingham Palace, which have stood for centuries as symbols of dignity, tradition, and privacy, suddenly seem fragile. And the shock doesn't end there. The revelation came not from a journalist, a tabloid, or a paparazzi photographer. It came from inside the royal family itself. Princess Eugenie, a voice that has largely stayed out of public scandal. Until now. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The moment the claim dropped, the world paused. Meghan Markle, the woman who once charmed the globe with her poise, grace, and Hollywood glamour, allegedly crossed a line no royal has ever dared to approach. Allegedly, she recorded private royal conversations, including those with the Queen. Think about that. The Queen, in her private chambers, speaking openly, perhaps confiding in a trusted member of her family, never expecting that every word might one day be captured and potentially weaponized. The implications are staggering, and as the story unfolds, we start to see not only the rupture in the royal family, but also the immense cultural and legal storm that would follow. It's easy to paint Meghan's life as a fairy tale. American actress meets prince, whirlwind romance, royal wedding watched by millions. The headlines celebrated her audacity, her charm, her modern approach to royal life. But behind the glittering exterior, there were cracks, tensions that no one outside the palace could see, whispers of discontent, subtle power struggles. The monarchy, after all, is not just a family, it is an institution. And institutions have rules, rules that are centuries old, rules that demand discretion, loyalty, and a strict hierarchy. When those rules are broken, the consequences are immediate and severe. Princess Eugenie's revelation did more than shock. It reframed the narrative entirely. This was not about tabloid rumors or celebrity gossip anymore. This was about trust, betrayal, and legal boundaries. The palace has always been intensely private. What happens within those walls rarely escapes. And when it does, it usually comes carefully curated, sanitized for public consumption. But here, the leak, or the alleged recordings, threatened to expose raw, unfiltered conversations. Conversations that were never meant to leave the room. Conversations that, if verified, could not only embarrass individuals, but shake the very foundation of the royal family. Now, why does this matter to you, the audience? Because this isn't just royal drama. This is a window into power, secrecy, and human behavior at the highest level. The story invites questions that go beyond the palace gates. How far can ambition push someone before ethics are compromised? How does a family, centuries old and steeped in tradition, cope when internal trust is violated? And more importantly, what happens when the world watches as private matters become public spectacle? These are questions that resonate because they touch on something universal: trust, privacy, and the consequences of betrayal. Let's take a moment to consider Meghan herself. Publicly, she is polished, articulate, and composed. She commands attention, navigates media with ease, and has cultivated a personal brand that is both glamorous and relatable. But the very qualities that make her effective in the public eye, her assertiveness, her media savvy, her strategic thinking, could also, in a closed environment like the palace, become dangerous if misused. Could ambition and self-preservation have driven her to make choices that others considered unacceptable? Or is this a narrative carefully constructed to place blame on her while ignoring deeper systemic issues within the royal household? We will explore that in detail. Every angle, every contradiction, every emotional beat. Nothing will be left unexplored. And let's not forget the human element. Behind the headlines, behind the palace walls, are real people with real emotions. The Queen, now in the twilight of her reign, entrusted her family with both her legacy and her privacy. Imagine the mix of disbelief, hurt, and concern upon hearing that someone within her inner circle might have broken that trust. Imagine Prince William, standing in the middle of a storm that no one could have foreseen, having to balance love, loyalty, and public responsibility. And then there's Harry, Meghan's husband, caught between defending his wife and preserving the integrity of the family he was born into. Every action, every reaction, every ripple of emotion feeds into this story. The tension is palpable, almost suffocating, because unlike a fictional drama, the stakes here are reality itself. As the world speculates, social media erupts. Headlines scream accusations, defenses, and speculation. The story spreads like wildfire, each outlet adding its spin, each fan and critic taking sides. Some see Meghan as a victim of an institution too rigid, too unforgiving. Others see her as someone who overstepped boundaries that should never be crossed. And then there's Princess Eugenie, who until now has largely remained in the background, quietly observing. Her revelation lands with the weight of authority precisely because it comes from within, and because it challenges everything we thought we knew about loyalty, secrecy, and the lines one should never cross. But what exactly did Eugenie reveal? And why now? Timing is crucial in this story. Public attention is fleeting, and revelations are carefully timed for maximum impact. Was Eugenie motivated by a sense of duty to protect the royal legacy, or was this a calculated move within a long-running internal struggle? Was it revenge, conscience, or simply an effort to set the record straight? Every choice, every nuance, adds layers to the drama, and that is what we will unpack, piece by piece. The story is not linear. It twists, it surprises, it shocks. Every detail matters. Every contradiction deepens the mystery. As we dive deeper, you will see how the alleged recordings set off a chain reaction. Meetings that once would have been routine became fraught with tension. Decisions were made behind closed doors, and the palace, often seen as stoic and unshakable, had to confront vulnerability. Protocols were questioned, trust was tested, and relationships were strained to the breaking point. The narrative is rich with irony. The very person welcomed with open arms, celebrated for bridging two worlds. The American outsider and the British royal tradition might have been the catalyst for one of the most dramatic internal crises in recent history. And here's where the suspense intensifies. There are still details hidden from public view. The recordings, if they exist, are not available to us. The exact contents, the tone, the context, all remain undisclosed. But the implications alone are enough to spark outrage, curiosity, and speculation. How does one navigate a world where every private word could become public? How does the monarchy, an institution built on secrecy and tradition, maintain stability when trust is broken from within? And perhaps the most compelling question of all, how will history remember Meghan Markle, Princess Eugenie, and the decisions made in those moments? By now, you're probably asking yourself, what really happened? Did Meghan intentionally record private conversations, or is this a misrepresentation of events? Was Princess Eugenie exposing wrongdoing, or was she inadvertently caught up in palace politics? The answers are complex. They involve human motives, emotional stakes, legal implications, and centuries-old traditions. And that is exactly what makes this story irresistible. It is a perfect storm of power, betrayal, intrigue, and emotion. As we begin our journey into this scandal, keep one thing in mind. Nothing is as it seems. Every revelation has layers, every claim has counterclaims, and every public face hides a private story. We will explore Meghan's actions, Princess Eugenie's revelation, the family's reaction, the legal ramifications, and the public fallout. Each piece of the puzzle brings us closer to understanding not just the event, but the deeper truth about loyalty, privacy, and ambition within the most famous family in the world. Everyone thought Meghan Markle had it all. The fairy tale story was perfect, a talented actress, a charismatic prince, and a global wedding watched by millions. The world fell in love with her almost instantly. Cameras captured her smiles, the elegance in her gestures, the confidence in every step she took across the palace halls. To the public, she was not just a duchess. She was a symbol of modernity, a woman who could bridge the chasm between Hollywood and centuries-old royal tradition. But appearances, as we are about to see, can be deceiving. From the very beginning, Meghan's entrance into the royal family carried an aura of inevitability, as if destiny itself had orchestrated this union. Headlines praised the romance as whirlwind but genuine, noting the almost cinematic contrast between her free-spirited American upbringing and the disciplined, meticulously choreographed life of the British monarchy. Yet, behind the cameras and staged smiles, a different reality was quietly taking shape. The palace, with all its grandeur and tradition, is not just a residence. It is a world unto itself, governed by rules invisible to outsiders, rules that dictate behavior, speech, and even emotion. Meghan arrived at this world with her own set of tools: independence, ambition, and a carefully crafted public persona. The clash between her approach and the rigid protocols of the monarchy would set the stage for tension. How does someone accustomed to controlling their public image navigate an institution built on centuries of hierarchy and secrecy? Meghan seemed prepared, even confident. She spoke eloquently, engaged with media strategically, and carried herself with the poise expected of a duchess. But confidence, as history often reminds us, can sometimes mask deeper vulnerabilities or spark subtle conflicts. Even in the early days, whispers began to circulate among palace staff and insiders. Some noticed her tendency to challenge protocol, her willingness to push boundaries, her focus on her own narrative. These observations were often subtle, almost imperceptible to the public, but they hinted at the fractures that would later widen into full-blown crises. Meghan, it seemed, had mastered the art of being both inside and outside the royal sphere, respected enough to participate in official engagements, yet independent enough to question and critique the machinery around her. That duality was magnetic, but also dangerous. It is crucial to understand that the royal family operates on trust as much as it does on protocol. Every conversation, every gesture, every seemingly minor action carries weight. The monarchy's strength has always been discretion, the confidence that private matters remain private, that the family's internal deliberations and disagreements do not spill into public view. When that trust is violated, intentionally or not, the consequences ripple outward with astonishing speed. And here, according to Princess Eugenie's explosive revelation, those boundaries were allegedly crossed. Meghan's life in the palace, even at first, was a delicate balancing act. On one hand, she was expected to fulfill her duties, attending charity events, hosting dignitaries, performing ceremonial obligations, and embodying the monarchy's public image. On the other hand, she was a global celebrity in her own right, accustomed to independence, accustomed to having her voice amplified in ways that the royal family historically does not allow. That tension between obligation and autonomy, between public fascination and private expectation, was the invisible undercurrent shaping every interaction she had, and it would eventually manifest in ways no one anticipated. Publicly, Meghan's narrative was one of empowerment and modernity. She championed social causes, advocated for gender equality, and spoke out on mental health issues. She leveraged her platform to create meaningful impact, cultivating a brand that resonated worldwide. Yet, the very skills that made her effective in the public eye, strategic thinking, media savvy, assertiveness, could, in a closed environment like the palace, be perceived as disruptive. To the insiders, these qualities sometimes appeared as challenges to authority, deviations from tradition, or even breaches of the unspoken rules that governed the royal household. The tension was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it was there, like a faint tremor beneath a calm surface. Meanwhile, Meghan's relationships within the family were complicated. Prince Harry, fiercely loyal and protective, became both her ally and her shield. Their bond, forged under the scrutiny of the world, was intense, passionate, and highly visible. The public adored the romance, seeing it as a modern fairy tale. But within palace walls, their closeness sometimes amplified existing tensions. Other family members, observing from positions steeped in tradition, could perceive behaviors differently, interpreting assertiveness as arrogance, strategic positioning as manipulation. These differences, magnified by the high-stakes environment of the monarchy, laid the groundwork for future conflict. Even as Meghan navigated these internal dynamics, she was constantly under the microscope of global media. Every outfit, every gesture, every public comment was dissected, analyzed, and critiqued. The pressure was immense. For someone accustomed to controlling her narrative, the palace environment, with its strict rules, internal hierarchies, and relentless scrutiny, was a new battlefield. And it is precisely in such high-pressure environments that small decisions can have enormous consequences. Allegedly, the decision to record private conversations, including those with the Queen, was born in this crucible of tension, ambition, and desire for control. But whether intentional or misguided, the act itself, once revealed, would change everything. It is also important to understand the role of perception in all of this. The public narrative of Meghan as a modern, independent duchess often clashed with the internal perception within the palace. What the world saw as empowerment and assertiveness could be perceived by insiders as disregard for tradition, a breach of trust, or even personal ambition overriding collective responsibility. This dichotomy between public image and private reality is central to understanding the scandal. Princess Eugenie's revelation did more than accuse. It exposed the fragile intersection of image, trust, and loyalty. It asked a question that no one could ignore. How does a family, bound by history and ceremony, respond when one of its own allegedly violates the most sacred codes of confidentiality? Amidst these dynamics, Meghan's early interactions with palace staff, advisors, and family members set the tone for future conflicts. She was charismatic and engaging, yet firm in her vision for her role. She sought influence, guidance, and autonomy simultaneously, a combination that is often fraught with risk in hierarchical structures. Those around her were left navigating a delicate balance, supporting her integration, maintaining protocol, and preserving the privacy and dignity of the monarchy. Every conversation, every meeting, every decision was weighted with potential consequences, known and unknown.